Welcome to the Q Podcast.
Q is about conversation.
If we're really concerned about ending poverty, we've got to be more concerned about creating justice.
Our cultural products as Christians need to both defy and resonate with the culture.
And God's doing amazing things. His church is expanding, His church is growing.
It's not what's the purpose of my life, it's what is the purpose that's been assigned.
Stay curious, think well, advance good. This is Q.
Hi, I'm Gabe Lyons. Welcome to another edition of the Q Podcast, and I can't wait for you to hear the talk and the conversation that's happening today. We're talking about gardens, and it's spring, right? We're all in this first week of spring. I don't know where you're at in the country, around the world, or if it feels like spring for you, but for us, that means it's time to start gardening. It's time to weed. It's time to start thinking about food that's going to grow this summer, and I know that might sound off topic for a Q Talk, but today you're going to see why it's completely on topic. We're going to have Joey Lankford. He began something called Cultivate. It's a nonprofit that's comprised of Middle Tennessee residents that come together to fight hunger. And the reason this is so critical, as you're going to see as we continue to have conversations around Q about the future, is that food is part of freedom. When you have the ability to sustain yourself, when you as a church have the ability to potentially help community gardens take place in your area, you're part of a very important long-term solution to what it means for your people to have freedom, to have the ability to sustain themselves, to not have to rely so much on the larger food chain that we saw in the last year got interrupted. And so I'm excited for you to get to hear this talk called Community Gardens as Mission and hear the passion of Joey Lankford describe the role the church can play in gardening. Maybe something you've never considered, but after today, I doubt you'll drive past a nice church lawn without thinking about this.
Good afternoon, and thanks for having me here. I am grateful to have the opportunity to speak about something that I'm very passionate about. I haven't always been passionate about it, and to be really, really honest, when I got the call, my response was, I'm not a really good farmer. But out of this COVID-19 and out of this unprecedented time that we've all heard about and you've heard speakers talk about, one of the things that I think is going to be a real access point for our churches and for us as leaders is food hunger. We're going to be able to really tangibly get engaged with those who are in need. In Matthew 25, God makes it very clear to us that one of those ways of touching Him is by going and feeding those who are hungry. In 2009, my story is one of being in healthcare, having a wife and kids, and attaining most of what I needed and wanted through how I'd been wired, groomed, and grown. I reached an American dream of sorts that I had in my own mind and vision with a wife and kids. I had a healthcare company with my family, and then I met the Lord in my barn in January of 2009 as we were adopting our child from Ethiopia. I went in there on a Friday afternoon at 3:30 and didn't come out until Sunday. And that conversation with the Lord resulted in us as a family leaving everything and transplanting ourselves in Cape Town, South Africa. As I mentioned a minute ago, I'm not a farmer, but there we saw economic poverty and hunger like I'd never seen here before. We were across the road in a very upper income neighborhood from 45,000 people, literally on 1 square mile. And being close to that hunger, we started this idea of how could we utilize underutilized land that the nonprofit that we were working within had to meet that food hunger need, but do more than that, to really change and give opportunity to the unemployment of 45-50% that was in that township, to provide access to jobs, not only to training, but a pathway to jobs and companies that were there in Cape Town. We worked there for 5 years with greenhouses and farmers, and I was literally trained in farming by a Zimbabwean man who took time to really show me and give me the patience that it needs. If you're listening to this and you've ever dealt with plants and farming, it takes a lot of patience. But after that 5 years, winds of change began to blow again, and we began to sense that God was going to allow us to hand that platform off to the locals. And we began to groom and grow them to run that, to create more opportunities for their own people, to give food into the townships through food distributions and networks and other nonprofits and churches. And then as I began to prepare to come back to Nashville, Tennessee, which is where I was born and raised, the conversation began to stir within my wife and I. What could we do? What could we do to meet the needs of the 48 million people that were in our own country who are suffering from food insecurity? I moved back with my family with $9,000 in the bank. You can't live long with as many kids as I have, 5, on $9,000. But we began to talk about this food insecurity and how we might engage it. And the governor of the state of Tennessee and his then commissioner of agriculture began to engage me about what it would look like for a faith-based nonprofit and for the state and the land that the state owns to set that up in some sort of training and development way for addicts that are suffering from opiate and meth addiction here in our state. That conversation led to us identifying 8 acres on Ellington Ag Center's property where we set up the greenhouses almost exactly like they look like in Africa. We started networking with other nonprofits and inviting people who were in halfway houses to come and work for a living wage, till the ground, get their hands dirty, and apply their life beside ours in a way that fed and met food insecure needs in their communities that they went back to in the evenings after they left work. We would pay them, we would train them, and then we began to network with UT and their ag extension for training and farming and resources so that we could get people equipped for the food safety regulations and guidelines that were coming from Washington, D.C. in this new era. They would have a job and a place in farms all across this state as they come out of prison and they come out of addiction. The plants, we also realized, provided a space for 3,000 volunteers last year from 24 states around the country to come and donate an hour and a half to 3 hours of their time working alongside an addict and putting their life beside somebody who was hungry and in need on our farm. You see, we took the land with the state and we made more than a farm, we made a place. We made a place that feeds people now. We made a place where people can walk a life with somebody they might not otherwise meet or touch. And we've given both the opportunity to be better because of that journey, that touch. We're not looking for programs anymore, folks. We're looking for people. And we've got to get those people in this time of opportunity that COVID-19 is presenting to us into our spaces and places, our churches, where we live, work, and play. We've got to put our lives beside theirs. And farming and food and community gardens, we've gotten more calls as an organization in the last month than I've got the first 4 years from pastors and governors all over this nation. The Secretary of Agriculture in Washington, D.C., wondering how we take and get these programs into underutilized land in the largest distribution network around this country, which is the local church. We can use land. We can take this land that we've always paid to have mowed, that's around these properties and in these spaces and places where people are hungry, and we've got to rethink them. We've got to rethink how we're using it. It's going to take a complete transformation in most of the churches that I've been in. But I believe that we need to take the land that we own, that we have, that God has placed within our reach. He's given it to us, and we need to start thinking about how we put gardens on it. It's my considered opinion that every church in this country needs to be looking around their bricks and mortar, and they need to see what kind of land God's given them, because as I said, we only have 8 acres, but we're feeding thousands and thousands of people. We've created networks with supermarkets and restaurants to buy a pound and support the wages of the men who are on the farm. And the network of companies and churches and leaders that are calling and coming around this farming aspect, because the soil, it really does heal the souls of people as they get on our dirt, they get their hands dirty, and they experience things that the land and the plants and the working relationships they build with people that they might not otherwise see is transforming their own lives. They're being better fathers and husbands and business leaders. They might leave the farm and have dirt under their fingernails that they have to explain for the first time. But it's making us better. It's giving us community. And for the church and for us as pastors and leaders, it's making a space. It's just making a place for us to gather around others who are suffering and say to them tangibly, because it's going to look a whole lot different when that mowed grass is muddy and there's people in it getting food. And they're coming to you because they need food. I was telling somebody just the other day, we have used distribution networks for a long, long time to get our food out to other people. We stay on the farm and we work alongside the addicts, and we've leveraged networks. Now they're coming to us. They're coming to the farm and they're asking for food. Would you join me? Would you join me in doing an asset review of everything you have and turn that land into a farm? Thank you.
Well, Joey, this is phenomenal in terms of giving us vision for something that a lot of us maybe have never even imagined or thought of before. And I know for some listening, this is challenging, right?
Right.
To review the land, as you just said, that's been getting mowed for years, and to consider, are we going to ever put a building over there?
Right.
Is that really the future? Or is there something better we can do with that land? So it takes a whole different perspective. But what are the first steps? What are the first conversations you would invite somebody to have who maybe they've never considered? This is the first time they're hearing about this. They need to do their research. They want to better understand. Is there a website they can go to?
Yeah, it's Cultivate, CUL2VATE.org. And that number 2 is growing food, growing people. And we are, as I mentioned, working to give resources and contextualize levels of participation by churches so they don't have to make the same mistakes that we've made over the last 4 or 5 years.
Well, and certainly, as you said, as we talked earlier with some of our other partner organizations, I mean, they're having a hard time keeping up with the demand. The demand's crazy for you guys.
Absolutely.
You're not going to have time to get on the phone and walk people through this. But look,
Right.
folks, this is gardening. This is farming.
It's simple.
There's a lot of people in your churches and in your community that probably are looking for ways to give back, to contribute, that could probably
Absolutely.
offer great skills and experience to help. And so I think, Joey, you would encourage them, and I know I would encourage them, to just start the conversation, open the door, see if there's an opportunity on their land to do something like this.
And as they identify the land, the human capital is sitting in their pews every time.
Yeah.
There's people in there who will champion that. And it's been my experience that somebody steps up and says, no, I'll do that.
Okay.
A retired doctor, a lawyer, and they put their life beside somebody, and it just ends up going.
Yeah.
You know, it's
beautiful.
dirty, it's hard, but it's ministry, man. It is Matthew 25:35. I was hungry and you fed me.
Yeah.
So,
Well, Joey, we thank you for being with us today
I appreciate
at
the
Q
invitation.
and sharing with us.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you very
God bless
much.
you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that talk. I mean, I don't know that I've ever met somebody more passionate about planting, about dirt, about seeds, about gardening. But Joey is awesome, and I hope that encourages you. These are the kind of talks we're going to be having April 22nd and 23rd as part of our 15th annual Q Conference. We're calling it the Culture Summit, and I want you to be a part of it with us. This is the space where once a year for 2 days, we're going to unpack some of the most important topics. We're thinking through where the culture's going, where the context is changing, and what does it mean to be faithful as Christians, as leaders, as husbands, as fathers, as wives, as people who work and lead in companies, in industry, in educational institutions, in the church. And so everybody can join us this year. That's the reality. Because of COVID and because of the way that changed things last year, we were able to create an incredible platform that not only allows now people to gather in person, but for you to host a watch party. So if you can't get it to Nashville, you're not in a season where you can travel right now, April 22nd and 23rd, I want to ask you, be intentional. If these kinds of learnings and conversations that you enjoy through the podcast are inspiring to you, and you're always wondering, man, I got to talk to somebody about this, this is going to be that opportunity. So join us. Be a host of a watch party. It's only $99 to host a watch party or to watch virtually online. But then you can invite your friends to join with you for only $25. You can have as many as you want, and they can come join in the room, or they can watch virtually with you online, and you can engage not only the 25 plus topics and presentations and conversations that we will be hosting, but 50 expert Q&As where we've invited the best of the best, the experts in a variety of topics, some of the most important issues you need to be aware of in 2021. And you're going to get to Zoom with them and interact one-on-one in a larger group where you can ask your questions to these experts and get the answers that you need. So I hope you'll learn more. Join us. Go to qideas.org/culture summit. That's qideas.org/culture summit, where you can see all the presentations, the topics we're taking on. We're adding more and more presentations and breakouts every day. So check that out and be a part of this global moment for 2 days where we really discern what is God up to in this moment and what does it mean for us to be faithful. I hope you'll join us there.